Hey, this is a further video to the suspensions. It's going to be a quick wrap up of my first video. This is Sports Fanatic News. I'm Joe Boric. Well, George Iloka, who hit Antonio Brown in the back of the end zone, which we can't speculate if it's intentional or not, but after the Smith-Schuster hit, it sure as hell looked intentional. But we can't say for sure is what I meant to say. So it is very, very, very unfair and wrong that, well, one, I agree with Big Ben wrote in an article, commented in an article written by Mark Sessler, around the NFL writer, and basically said, I don't think it fits the crime if Gronk got a one-game suspension for doing a hit outside the play, and then Smith-Schuster also got a one-game suspension for doing a hit inside the play. Gronk definitely should have been suspended. If we do one-game suspensions for big hits inside the play, like Iloka originally got and Smith-Schuster did get, then we need to do definitely stronger, harsher suspensions for hits outside the play, which was Gronk's, because the play was blown dead, and he can't argue if he didn't think it was dead, because the dude was freaking out of bounds when he elbowed him in the back, so there's no argument there. But, like I said in the last video, they need to come to a baseline of how they deal with these suspensions. Otherwise, there is going to be this BS for continuing years on what is going on. The NFL really needs to step up here, and it is a disgrace, as far as I'm concerned, that Smith-Schuster and Iloka got the same as Gronk. Gronk should have got at least 2 or 3 games for doing a big hit like that outside the play that could have really been detrimental to that player's health far in the future and not just this season. Elbowing somebody in the neck, back of the head, that could be career-ending. What Smith-Schuster did and what Burfitt did, hits to the head, could also be, if really bad, ultimately career-ending. So the penalties outside the play, in my opinion, should be at least 3 games, and then big hits inside the play should be at least 2 to correct that from my last video. But overall, these big hits, if you don't want to make one and one the other, they need to all be at least 2 games. But then you still have the argument of, well, Rob Gronkowski's was more egregious because it was outside of the play than the hit by Smith-Schuster and Iloka because it was during the football game while inside the play. So, in my opinion, you need to come up with a baseline where if you give people 1 game for hits inside the play, I don't know if that's enough, but fine. You give those guys 1 game, you give the other guys 2, and then you don't let them appeal it down to 1. You can't keep doing this appeal bull crap, because that's where the big inconsistency and imbalance is, because Smith-Schuster went for a hit where John Runyon described it as a defense, came in as a defensive player and took out Vontaze Burfitt. But George Iloka is a defensive player and took out Antonio Brown. Granted, Antonio Brown didn't get injured, but that's a sediment to how great that guy gets his body in shape and how tough that dude is, where he didn't even get injured from getting absolutely clocked in the head. So, I agree with John Runyon that Smith-Schuster did come in like a wrecking ball pretty much and came in like a defensive player and took out somebody when he was the offensive player, but then that argument should be used the same for Iloka on Antonio Brown, because he is a defensive player and obviously came in for a dirty hit to try to knock the ball out of Antonio Brown in the end zone. And it's going to be very hard to say that you didn't do that on purpose in a game that was as such as the Monday Night Football game. I just think it is very poor by the NFL to give Juju the 1-game suspension and Gronk have the same baseline suspension when Gronk should be suspended more for a hit outside the play, and then go right ahead and have Iloka win the appeal when his hit was in response to a Smith-Schuster hit. In context, it could be worse when you have a bad action to start, but then you respond with another bad action that makes you look worse than the guy that, in my opinion, did it at first, because then you can't keep your control and you can't keep your moral guidelines in check and not go after somebody because somebody else did it to your teammate. That's just a freaking disgrace, in my opinion. And the fact that the NFL kept one guy's suspension and not the other doesn't make any sense, even if the guy's offense was he didn't mean to hit him in the head. Well, how do you prove that? You can't. So I would have just kept the suspension because it's very unbalanced, it's very inconsistent, and it's frankly, like people like me, starting to piss people off how they deal with these suspensions. Well, this has been a reaction to that. George Iloka now only has a $36,000-some fine, which is pretty much penny change for anybody in the NFL. So we need to really get the act together, the NFL does, so this stuff doesn't keep happening. There's not a load of BS. I'm Sports Fanatic News. This is Joe Boric. This has been a continuation since Iloka's suspension was gone, and I wanted to comment on that. Peace out, everybody. I will do a look ahead to the Flyers shortly.